Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, a pivotal transgender case is taken up by the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, Biden and Trump prepare for this week's debate.
And UNWRA is sued for alleged connections to Hamas.
But first, let's start with some legal news. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge to Tennessee's ban on transgender surgeries for children. The court will consider the case during its next term, which will begin in October. The justices will then weigh an appeals court ruling that upheld the state's ban on these procedures. According to the Daily Wire, the way the Supreme Court rules on the issue could also affect other states, particularly those that have already banned the procedures. This includes at least 20 red states. The plaintiffs in the case argued that banning trans procedures for minors violates the 14th Amendment, which requires everyone to be treated equally under law. They also said the ban undermines parental rights.
Meanwhile, let's now go to FISM's Ian Patrick, who has an in-depth look at how both Biden and Trump are preparing for this week's debate.
Well, the first presidential debate of this election cycle is almost already here. So how are the candidates preparing for it? Well, according to reports, President Biden's team is working with him at Camp David on preparation for this debate. And while details have been scant on how he's actually preparing, his team has indicated that Biden will be aggressive and lean into the convicted felon rhetoric regarding Trump. Biden is going into this debate with a surrounding belief or understanding that if he underperforms, then he might be replaced by the Democrat Party. Or at least that's a prevailing theory among some strategists and voters. Biden's team seems to understand that he cannot be seen as underwhelming in any way whatsoever and are looking to avoid that outcome. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump is taking a different path, whereas in the past, Trump and other Republican strategists have cast Biden as being unable to keep up in a debate. Trump now seems to be flipping the script and even arguably overselling on Biden's debate ability. For instance, during an interview with the All In podcast, Trump remarked on Biden's previous debate with Paul Ryan during the vice presidential debates years ago.
All I can say is this. I watched him with Paul Ryan, and he destroyed Paul Ryan. So I'm not underestimating him. It is what it is.
The overall strategy for Trump was expounded upon further by New York Times senior political correspondent Maggie Haberman, who said that Trump's prep is more focused on explaining policy rather than trying to actually debate Biden.
They're doing what is described to me as policy time. They are having him meet with various people. They're cycling in advisors, senators, a bunch of folks to talk about different topics. I don't think there's a ton that Trump is going to be surprised by on this one.
And while the Trump team's play could work out for this debate, there is speculation that Trump's actual competition might not be on stage with him, but from the network hosting the debate. Trump and CNN did not get along during his presidency, rather infamously, and they continue to butt heads over key issues. Some expect this behavior to continue during the debate, especially given a recent interview between CNN anchor Casey Hunt and Trump campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt. Leavitt was abruptly pulled from the air in the middle of an interview when she said that CNN would be hostile towards the president. Here's some of that exchange, during which Leavitt accuses CNN and debate host Jake Tapper of political bias.
What do you expect from Joe Biden?
Well, first of all, it takes someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently frequently likened President Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay.
Now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome to come back and speak about Donald Trump.
Later on in Steve Bannon's War Room, Leavitt doubled down on her statements regarding both Tapper and CNN.
This is a guy who has clearly made his opinions about President Trump known. It's not me making that up. This is who he is. He's an anti-Trump leftist who's a former Democrat staffer, yet he's given the privilege of hosting this debate. And so I thought it was worthy bringing those comments up. Clearly, CNN doesn't want their audience to know the truth about fake Tapper.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks for that reporting. It's certainly going to be a drama-filled Thursday evening. We'll have to see if this comes up. That is, after 7 long years, fact-checking site Snopes is finally debunking Democrats' claims that Donald Trump called neo-Nazis very fine people, calling that claim false in a new fact check. Back in August 2017, if you remember, a protest down in Charlottesville, Virginia over the removal of a Confederate statue turned deadly when neo-Nazis and white supremacists who actually organized that protest ended up clashing with Antifa. When asked about what happened, Trump had this to say.
And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
For years now, Democrats have used Trump's very fine people comment against him as a sort of political club, with President Biden even saying it's the very reason he decided to run for president in the first place.
He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime.
But this week, Snopes is correcting the record, pointing out that only moments later, Trump explicitly condemned both neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
The Trump campaign's press secretary has reacted to this new fact check, saying, quote, the Charlottesville lie, as they said, was another hoax perpetrated by the corrupt Democrats and their mouthpieces in the fake news media, just like the Hunter Biden laptop and the Russian collusion scandal and so many others.
Meanwhile, in Congress, Republican Representative Anna Paulina Luna is forcing a vote on AG Merrick Garland's inherent contempt resolution. Republicans have been trying to get to the bottom of President Joe Biden's closed-door interview with special counsel Robert Hur. When evidence presented itself that Biden had mishandled classified documents in his possession, the judge did not recommend charges against the president because of his mental decline and age. AG Merrick Garland has since refused to hand over the full recording on multiple occasions, resulting in conservative outrage. While the House has already voted to hold Garland in contempt of Congress, Luna's resolution would go a step further.
Obviously, I do not have faith in the Department of Justice. I don't think the American people do either. Look at the two-tier justice system that we're seeing play out in this country. And so what I've done is I've actually filed a privilege motion, meaning I can bring this to the floor and call it up myself. It doesn't have to go through committee or through leadership. And ultimately, there's something called inherent contempt. It hasn't been done since the early 1900s, but that would basically give Congress the authority to go and get Garland and compel him to force what we are asking, which is for those recordings.
Inherent contempt would mean Garland could get arrested and potentially sent to prison for not complying with Congress. The House could vote on the resolution as early as this week.
And quickly, we're coming up on a break here. President Biden is now condemning this past weekend's riot outside a Los Angeles synagogue as both anti-Semitic and un-American. Pro-Hamas protesters clashed with pro-Israel counter-protesters on Sunday after they blocked the entrance to an Orthodox synagogue. At least one person was arrested and another person was injured. President Biden, he posted on X, quote, Americans have a right to peaceful protest, but blocking access to a house of worship and engaging in violence is never acceptable. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass likewise called the violence over the weekend abhorrent and unacceptable. All right, and up next, we'll dive into international news when we come back from this short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today.
Hey, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We turn now to the situation in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is apparently now backing Biden's three-phase ceasefire hostage deal, telling the Knesset yesterday that he is committed to that plan. This is actually a rather quick reversal for the Prime Minister, who only the day before said he was only willing to do what he called a partial deal. This deal now is intended to release all the remaining hostages and result in a sustainable calm in Gaza. However, former IDF commander Doron Avital says Hamas has so far rejected this deal, demanding a complete end to the war as basically a precondition for any negotiations.
Hamas basically demands, in the end, a complete halt to the war, even as in many senses a precondition to the negotiation, which we cannot agree, but a sort of a prolonged ceasefire in return for hostage deal, according to the three stages that was presented in this Israeli offer or Biden's offer. This is the roadmap that we can follow forward.
At the same time, Israel may have to fight alone if war breaks out with Hezbollah. President Biden's top military commander said yesterday that the U.S. might not be able to defend Israel should it go to war with the Lebanese terrorist group. He also warned that a wider conflict would put U.S. troops in increased danger. However, critics say that the Biden administration's current restraint on Israel would only embolden Hezbollah. Former IDF intelligence officer Rafael Jerusalmi says Israel is the only nation holding back the axis of evil in that region.
We are the only country in the army holding back a flow of jihadi troops and armies. And it's not only Hezbollah or Iran, it's Iraq, it's all the Shiite in Syria, it's all that axis of evil that goes all the way to Moscow and Beijing. So we are doing this job for the free world, for the Americans. We are protecting Americans' interest in the Middle East. The least they can do is help us.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded that Israel would be ready to take on the challenge. He said the IDF is preparing to fight on multiple fronts.
Elsewhere, the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, better known as UNWRA, is once again in the crosshairs as a new lawsuit filed by dozens of Israelis accuses the agency of aiding and abetting Hamas on October 7th for their terror attack.
There can be no more ifs, buts, or maybes. UNWRA has become an inseparable and indistinguishable arm of Hamas. It has become an incubator for hate, incitement, and terrorism. There are those who say it's just a few rotten apples, but the fact of the matter is, this organisation has become rotten to the core and infested with terrorism.
The suit is being brought by over 100 people who survived the attack or who had relatives who were killed in the attack. You just heard from their attorney in that clip. Earlier this year, UNWRA fired 10 staffers accused by Israel of taking part in October 7th. At the same time, Israel also claims to have found a Hamas base underneath UNWRA's headquarters in Gaza City and have shared video allegedly showing Hamas terrorists inside an UNWRA compound in Rafah.
And in other international news, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has reportedly agreed to plead guilty to charges of violating the U.S. Espionage Act. The plea will reportedly be finalized on Wednesday when Assange travels from his home country of Australia to the Northern Mariana Islands to stand before a U.S. federal court. Prosecutors have requested a 62-month sentence, which will result in Assange not having to serve any time in prison. Instead, the government has chosen to count the nearly 5 years he spent in a British prison fighting extradition to the United States. Assange was indicted by a federal grand jury in 2019 on charges of illegally obtaining and disseminating classified information related to American military activities in Iraq and Afghanistan. Assange left prison in the United Kingdom earlier this week and is expected to return to his native Australia following his court appearance. His wife, Stella Assange, thanked those who supported their family.
Throughout the years of Julian's imprisonment and persecution, an incredible movement has been formed. A movement of people from all walks of life, from around the world, who support not just Julian and not just us and our family, but what Julian stands for, truth and justice. We still need your help. What starts now with Julian's freedom is a new chapter.
Meanwhile, Islamic terrorism sadly continues to rear its ugly head in Russia. At least 21 people are now dead, most of them police officers, and nearly 50 others injured following a series of weekend attacks at churches and synagogues in Russia's mainly Muslim region of Dagestan. The region's governor has since declared 3 days of mourning following those attacks.
Today has become a day of tragedy for Dagestan, and not only for Dagestan, but for our entire country. Unprecedented in their cruelty, terrorist attacks were committed today against religious sites in the capital of Dagestan, Makhachkala, and our ancient city of Derbent.
Sunday's attack was the deadliest in Russia since the concert hall shooting back in March, which left 145 people dead. ISIS, which claimed responsibility for March's attack, is praising the attack in Dagestan. They said it was carried out by, quote, brothers in the Caucasus who showed that they are still going strong. All right, with that, we have more news coming up next. But first, let's go to Seth Udinsky for a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, here's a Bible trivia question to stump your friends if you'd like. Who, outside of the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel, was the only king in Israel not from the tribe of Judah? Well, common sense would tell us that it was, in fact, the very first king of Israel. You recall that David, though the greatest king of Israel, was actually not the first. There was one who came before him from the tribe of Benjamin, a man who started off on the right foot, but quickly fell into disobedience and disfavor from God. He was the first king of Israel, a very complicated fellow named Saul. Now, Saul was from a somewhat well-to-do family from the tribe of Benjamin. He had all the physical qualities of a king. He was tall in stature, popular among the people, and an apparent ideal choice to be the prince of the people of God, as the prophet Samuel described. But Saul's very ascension to the throne was actually the result of wickedness, for the people of God had, as Samuel had spoken to them, rejected God as their king. They wanted to be like the other nations of the world, so God, as he often does to unrepentant sinners, handed them over to the desires of their heart and gave them a king. Saul reigned over Israel from 1052 to 1011 BC, and his reign started out somewhat promising. He was successful over his enemies, but this success did not last long when Saul allowed his man-pleasing to take the place of obedience to God. Several times Saul disobeyed or only partially obeyed the commandments of God, and God rejected Saul as king because of it. In the middle of his reign, in fact, Saul was given a harrowing prophecy. God had wrenched the kingdom from his hand and would give it to another. Now, from this point on, God handed Saul over to his own sinful desires, and the result was disastrous for Saul, who would then be tormented by demonic forces for the rest of his life. Now, Saul's rejection of God and God's rejection of Saul resulted in quite possibly the most prosperous era in Israel's history, as God would indeed wrench the kingdom from Saul's hand and would give it to another. And that future mighty king was an obscure little shepherd boy from Bethlehem named David. Now, Saul's first interaction with David actually came when the Israelites were cornered by the Philistines and by their champion, the giant Goliath, whom no one could defeat and everyone was terrified of. Now, it was Saul's job as king to be the one to fight Goliath, but like the rest of Israel, he was simply too scared, so young David stood in Saul's and in his people's place as their champion and slayed the giant, granting his people victory. Long before he became king, David was the champion hero of Israel. Now, while David, who would actually marry one of Saul's daughters, grew in popularity, Saul grew ferociously mad in jealousy. Later in life, Saul developed this kind of love-hate relationship with David, who was in many ways a son to him, while also his greatest threat to the throne. Numerous times, Saul tried to kill David in fits of rage, but when David forgave him and spared his life on numerous occasions, Saul begged for David to show mercy on his descendants and admitted that David, better than he, would indeed someday be king of Israel. Saul's life would end in tragedy as he would die by suicide in battle after reigning over Israel for 40 years. David would replace him as king and would usher in the golden age of Israel. Thanks so much for joining me once again for a moment in history.
Hi, I'm Aisha. At first, I was debating whether or not I was really pregnant and took a test. While I was waiting, they talked to me about different pregnancy choices and different options and information that helped me be more educated. To confirm, I got an ultrasound of the pregnancy test, and it was for sure positive, and I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
Do you want to invest in biblically responsible stocks? Financial Issues can help. For only $132 per year, our team of experts will help you make wise decisions with your money and guide you to successful investments that will not dishonor God. You'll also have access to our Portfolio Tracker tool, which will help you keep an eye on your asset allocations, and our Buys and Sells page, which will give you valuable information about biblically responsible stocks. Being a Financial Issues partner is the best way to invest in accordance with biblical values. Make the most of your money by becoming a partner today. Sign up at financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
But I felt very comfortable in that decision because I found a lot of support. Like everyone here, always made sure keep in contact with me. This is what ultimately changed my decision. You know, knowing that I had all this support that I didn't know I had. Now that he's here and he's 4 months old, I look at him and I honestly it just makes me want to cry.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's start in culture, where Planned Parenthood is gearing up for the elections. According to the Associated Press, the nonprofit will spend $40 million to influence elections in swing states. Their campaign will target 8 states, including Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. These were states Biden won in 2020. The campaign is also hoping to flip North Carolina, and it will likewise target Montana, New Hampshire, and New York to secure House and Senate seats. Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Votes, Jenny Lawson, said, quote, "Abortion will be the message of this election, and it will be how we energize voters." She added that abortion will be the winning ticket in 2024, and we will have to see if she is right. According to a Pew Research poll last month, 57% of Republicans were against abortion in all or most cases, while 85% of Democrats supported abortion in all or most cases. Overall, about 63% of Americans say abortion should be legal.
Of course, there's kind of a caveat to that number, though, because they do want it to be legal, most of them, but within more restrictions, usually up to about 15 weeks, not nearly as much as what Democrats are pushing for.
Yeah, I think the average American doesn't understand what they're actually
they just know they're picking abortion or no abortion. They don't realize it could be more nuanced than that.
Exactly, yeah.
To see how that plays out this year. Meanwhile, it didn't, that is, take too long for civil rights groups to sue over Louisiana's new 10 Commandments law. A number of groups, led by the American Civil Liberties Union, filed their new lawsuit yesterday, arguing the state's law requiring the 10 Commandments to be displayed in classrooms is, in fact, unconstitutional. The ACLU said this, quote, "Public schools are not Sunday schools. We must protect the individual right of students and families to choose their own faith or no faith at all." They went on to say, quote, "The separation of church and state is a bedrock of our nation's founding principles. The 10 Commandments are not." However, Governor Jeff Landry, who signed that bill last week, he disagrees. He says the 10 Commandments do have historical value to the country, not just religious value. He said, quote, "If you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses."
Meanwhile, Center Square reports that more than 12 million illegal immigrants crossed the U.S. border since 2021. This includes more than 241,000 apprehensions of migrants in May alone. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data, more than 2.2 million people crossed the border nationwide this year. In May, over 1.35 million illegal immigrants were single adults. Based on current predictions, the total number of apprehensions might surpass last year's record, 3.2 million. From 2021 to 2024, the total number of arrests was over 10 million. Center Square attributes these high numbers to DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas' lenient policy that allows migrants to enter through pathways that were prohibited before.
And finally, let's take a look at a different kind of record-breaking travel. That is, the summer travel season is now in full swing, and the TSA said it actually broke a new record when it screened a whopping 2.99 million passengers, airline passengers that is, this past Sunday. Sunday's new record broke the prior high of 2.95 million. That was set in late May. It also comes as 7 of the 10 busiest travel days on record occurred just within this past year. In fact, the TSA does not think this new record that was set on Sunday is really going to last all that long. They say it will likely scan more than 3 million people this coming Friday as they get ready to travel for the July 4th holiday. They're expecting to screen more than 32 million people during the entirety of the Independence Day travel period. And as far as the summer goes in total, one group believes airlines will transport 271 million passengers during this season. That's up 6.3% from last year. And you're going to be one of those travelers in the next coming weeks too, aren't you?
Yeah, not next week, but after that,
But
you'll be traveling for 4th of July.
You're going to be in the number, though. That's right.
I think we both will be,
Contribute to the data.
All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates until our next show tomorrow, you can follow us on social media, or you can also download our FISM app so you can take our news on the go if you happen to be traveling. Thank you so much. God bless, and we'll see you next time with more news coverage.